The Lord be with you. And also with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 20th chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
Some of the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus with a question. Teacher, he said, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife but no children, the man must marry the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first one married a woman and died childless. Second, and then the third married her, and in the same way, the 7 died, leaving no children. Finally, the woman died too. Now then, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since the 7 were married to her? Jesus replied, the people of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy of taking part in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage. And they can no longer die, for they are like the angels. They are God's children, since they are children of the resurrection. But in the account of the burning bush, even Moses showed that the dead rise. For he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. For to him all are alive. Gospel.
Praise to you, O Christ.
So as I mentioned at the beginning of the service, this month of November is a kind of a unique month in our liturgical year, in our unfolding of the story of salvation history. And we're invited this month in particular, as the weather grows colder, as the earth starts to still, as things begin to go fallow, to reflect on this idea of death. But not just death, but death as a person of faith, a person who believes in resurrected life. What does it mean to live as a son or a daughter of the promise of resurrection? So we began this reflection, this conversation last week intentionally when we remembered those saints who have died, who have gone before us in faith, who stand at the presence of the throne of God with us, praying with us and for us. We reflected on those people because we know they're with us. As we were told in our gospel, they are alive with us in God. And so we intentionally raise them up. And then at the end of this month, we will talk about Christ the King, the one who rules over all peoples in all time and all history and all creation to draw us together into one in God. That's our promise as the people of the resurrection. So I wanted to just talk to you a little bit this morning about the scriptures that were given, especially today, this reading from Job. You know, as I was praying with this and listening this week, I had a memory come back to me. It's very real, and I was surprised at how much energy I had around this memory. But it put me in touch with what I think Job may have been experiencing in our reading today. When I was in 2nd grade, I went to St. Patrick's grade school in Dubuque, and about this time of the year, our desks got moved around. You know how teachers like to do that, to keep you like sitting next to new people and making new friends. Well, I got put in the back of the room because I was trustworthy and I was a good kid. And I got put right in front of the blackboard. You know those blackboards that used to be on rollers that they could roll into the room and flip around, and it was black and green a lot of times, depending on the side? I was sitting right in front of the blackboard. And you know who was sitting next to me? Teddy Klein, the infamous Teddy Klein. the youngest of 5 Klein brothers who terrorized every teacher that they had. And I got to sit next to Teddy Klein. Why he was in the back of the room, I don't know. But I think the teacher wanted to create some space so she didn't have to hear his comments all the time. Well, I did. And I did not feel good about sitting by Teddy Klein. Well, Teddy was one of those kids who, like out on the playground, when you're playing tag, he always tagged you a little harder so you fell and skinned your knee, and then he would laugh and run off, right? Teddy was the kid on your kickball team who would purposely turn around and kick the ball out into the street backwards so the game was disrupted and you had to run out into traffic. Well, not run out into traffic, but you had to go out and retrieve the ball. He was always disrupting, always bullying, always an energy. I don't know Teddy's story. I don't know what their home life was like. But as I reflect back on it now, he was an angry kid. His whole family was angry. I don't know what was going on there, but he was a broken kid. Well, about this time in the year, maybe a week had gone by. I was sitting at the end of lunch. I had finished my lunch, and we had a little bit of free time. I was sitting at my desk, and I was reading a book. Yes, it was probably a Dick and Jane book. But I was reading it at my desk by myself, and all of a sudden, I felt myself physically being lifted out of my desk by my arm, all 52 pounds of me. And I was being marched out of the room rather handily by the teacher, Sister Luella. And she was mad. She said, I can't believe you wrote that on the chalkboard about me. We'll see what the principal has to say about this. And I said, to her, I don't know what you're talking about. And she said, take a look. And on the chalkboard it said, Sister Luella is mean. You fill in the blank. It was a little stronger than that. And I looked at her and I said, I didn't write that. That's not my handwriting. Why would I write that? I didn't write that. She said, one of the other students identified that you were the one who wrote that. I said, I didn't write it, sister. Why would I write that? And she is dragging me down the hallway to the principal's office. And I am starting to become very upset. And she plops me in the chair in front of the principal and begins to tell the principal what I had done on the chalkboard. And I said to the principal, I didn't do it. I didn't write it. And I hadn't. And I was being accused of something I hadn't done. And I began to cry. And the principal was railing on me about respect for teachers and why would I write something so nasty and what would that mean for the rest of the kids and how would they ever be able to look? And I was crushed. I couldn't say anything to change the situation. I couldn't say anything to convince the teacher and the principal. And I sat there and I cried. And when I finally was taken back to the classroom and put back in my desk, my tear-stained cheeks all red, and my eyes bloodshot from crying, I looked over and Teddy sat there with a grin on his face. And I couldn't believe they believed Teddy. I was humiliated. I was infuriated. I was crushed. My spirit was crushed. My trust was crushed. I went home and I talked to my parents about what had happened, and they went and talked to the teacher, and she never said a word to me about it. And I did not speak to that teacher the rest of the year. My trust in the adults in that classroom was crushed. And when it came time to have the opportunity to participate in First Holy Communion, I said no. Because not only was my trust in the adults in my life at that time crushed, but I wasn't sure that the God they had been telling me about was anything like love or forgiveness or anybody I wanted to be in communion with. My image of God was shattered. And it took me a full year to recover from that before I started to trust anybody in that school again, before I started to receive communion, because my next teacher shared with me a different image. All I wanted was for somebody to clear my name, to say, no, that's not the kind of person Rodney is. No, Rodney wouldn't do something like that. Rodney's a good kid. All I longed for was for somebody to vindicate my name. And it didn't happen. You know, I think that's what Job is talking about in this story that we hear in our first reading today. See, Job, if you remember that story, he lived hundreds of years before Jesus. But Job experienced life very similar to the way Jesus did. Job was a patriarch, a head of a clan. He was blessed with a wife and with many children and with a large clan and tribe and herds. And he was a wealthy man with honor and respect. He was referred to as a righteous man by the people around him. And then, for some reason, he starts to suffer loss in his life. His wife becomes sick and dies. His children, one by one, start to die. His herds start to die. His land goes fallow. Around him, life disappears. He is covered with sores and boils and aches. And he goes and sits out on the dung heap in mourning and cries out to God, "Why? Show me what I did to deserve this curse." And his friends who came to comfort him and support him said to him, "Well, just admit what you did wrong. See, we know how God operates. We've got a handle on God. God's a retributive justice God. You get what you deserve, Job. What did you do to deserve this?" And Job says, I don't know. I don't think I violated the law. I haven't cursed anybody. I haven't put anybody down. I haven't cheated anybody. I don't know. And his friends say, "Well, Job, if you would just admit it, then we can move on." And Job is left saying, I don't understand. I don't understand. And he sits on the dung heap day after day, shaking his fist at God. "Why? This isn't fair, God. Why are you doing this to me?" And no answer is given him. And God in heaven in the story is happy to have Job sitting, shaking his fist at him angrily, because if he is doing that, he's still in relationship with God. And when he's in relationship with God, things can change. Things can happen. And so time goes on, and Job, after crying out to God so many times, just clear my name, God. Help me to show those around me that I didn't deserve that this isn't the way you are. And God says, "Oh, we'll show them all right. These friends of yours who think they have a handle on how I am, on how things go, on why bad things happen to people, oh no, we're going to show them a different way." And we hear that without admitting he had done anything wrong, Job is restored. After he's lost everything, after he has experienced death, he is as good as dead. Then he hears from God, "Were you there when I created the universe? Were you there when I laid the foundations of the earth? Were you there when I created the tides and the waves and trees and seeds? Were you there? You question me and my power?" And Job says, No, I don't. I trust you, God. And it's in that humility, it's in that trust, when he lets everything go, that life is restored to him. We hear that Job receives a new wife, and he has a new family, and he's able to raise up new flocks, and his lands again begin to produce. And his friends around him look at him and scratch their heads, and they say, "Wait, how does this work? Blessed, then cursed, then blessed, without admitting what he had done wrong? God, what are you doing?" And their understanding of God was challenged that day through the experience of resurrection in Job's life. He had life, he had abundance, and then he experienced suffering and death. And then because of faith, because of trust, because of letting go, he experienced new life. We know, as we talk about the Christ, Jesus the Christ, that is his story. That is the pattern that Job and Jesus show us for our own lives. Life, suffering, death, resurrection, over and over and over again. What does that look like today? See, in our gospel today, Jesus encounters the same experience with those Sadducees, those religious leaders, the ones who came to their positions of power, not by study or not by call, but because of their fathers. They were the ones who became aristocrats in the nation because their families enjoyed political influence and power. They were the ones who were friendly with the Romans. They were the ones who were protecting their positions. They were protecting their status and their honor. And they were locked in the Torah, in the Mosaic law. And they come to Jesus. And they're saying, this resurrection that's being talked about, it doesn't make any sense. See, in that time, we have a conflict going on in the early Christian community between Greek philosophy and Jewish anthropology. Are we enfleshed spirits, as the Greeks would say, or are we animated earth, as the Jews would say? United in God, both sacred. Where the Greeks are saying, oh no, we're living here to get rid of this body, to get rid of this flesh which is mortal, so that our spirits can rejoin the eternal. And that was in conflict, and they were arguing about that. And the Pharisees were saying, yeah, there is a resurrection like that. There's something to look forward to. And the Sadducees were saying, no, that's not found in our scriptures. We don't know how to talk about that. We don't believe beyond the restoration of the Israelite people. That's our resurrection. But see, Greek philosophy is individualized. Hebrew philosophy is communal. And so Jesus is standing in the midst of this, and he's trying to have a conversation with them. And once again, God is saying to those who say, we've got a handle on this. We know how God works. It's through Israel. It's through the restoration of Israel. And Jesus says to them, no, you don't understand life in our God. You can't even understand the very scriptures you read, because they give to him this absurd question, right? They focus it in the life here now. Why? Because their practice was that you had to raise up children to the oldest son in the family, the one who has the birthright, the one who owns the land, the one who's supposed to carry on the name of the family, to be the patriarch. Brothers have to provide an heir for that oldest brother. That's how they lived on in their perception of things. That's how their resurrected life was lived. But Jesus says to them, don't you understand? Beyond physical death, everything changes. In God, there is no living and dying in the body anymore. There is no providing children so somebody can live on. See, the truth is, we are all alive in God all of the time. And the resurrected life, whether here or beyond this physical plane, is one that is beyond your imagination. It is beyond your physicality. It is a way of being alive in God. But live it today as if it is already true. You and I, called into relationships, particular relationships. Some of us are lucky enough in our lives to know a married partner who reveals some of God's love to us. And Jesus says that is helpful in this life. Help someone to help us to be holy, to be our best selves. But it pales because when we die, that particular relationship gives way to the universal relationship. Because in our death, in our physical death, we become all in all with God. Related to all because we share the DNA of God in our very beings. That is resurrected life. It doesn't start when we physically die. It's been true from the beginning of creation. And we are participating in it now. And the gift of life is now. God's perspective of us never changes. But how we perceive ourselves in that might. So, if I had stayed in relationship with my second grade teacher, perhaps there would have been some reconciliation there. But I didn't allow that to happen. Perhaps one of the encouragements that we're hearing in our scriptures today is when we suffer, when we experience death, when we experience separation, for us to stay true to our God, to surrender to that mystery, to let go of our need to control and to figure out and to understand and to say how God is working so that God can actually love us into life. Today, now. That's what this sacrament proclaims for us. Faithfulness to a God who raised Jesus up out of physical death. A Jesus who reveals to us the eternal Christ who is with us today, within us, among us, in us, calling us to be all in all. That is resurrected life.